Greetings and welcome to the Saco City Council meeting for Monday, February 8th, 2021. Call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Let the record reflect that all city councilors are present, as well as the city administrator, Brian Cainrath. At this moment in time, we'd like to invite everybody to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is located behind City Administrator Cainrath. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Next item on the agenda is item 4. Under general, we have item A, a joint meeting with the school board scheduled for Wednesday, February 24th. Again, Wednesday, February 24th. Next up is item 5, committee correspondence to council. Is there any committee correspondence to council at this time? No committee correspondence. Moving on. At this moment in time, we arrive to item 6, which is public comment. City Administrator Cainrath, have we received any public comment for tonight's meeting?
Nothing at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. At this moment in time, if there's anybody from the public who would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9, and you'll be unmuted to speak to the council. Again, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9 from a cellular phone. First up, we have Kelly Archer. Kelly, you've been allowed to unmute. Please go ahead and state your name and address for the record and provide your comments to the city council. Please remember that everyone has 3 minutes during public comment. Kelly, we cannot hear you if you're talking. Please hit the unmute button. Okay, well, we figure out those technical issues there. We're going to move on to the next. The next person looking to speak is identified as Philip Hatch in the Zoom attendee list. Philip, you've been allowed to speak. Go ahead and unmute and provide your comments to the city council. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
All right, thank you. My name is Phil Hatch. I live at 19 Evergreen Drive here in Saco. Earlier today, I forwarded the council and the mayor an email with a opinion letter from Attorney John Bannon attached. John is our legal counsel to the neighborhoods surrounding the Kimball Deering parcel off Bradley Street. I just want to read some excerpts from that letter from you in my limited 3 minutes. Attorney Bannon provides a very strong legal argument supporting the retention of the MDR zone as presented in the original zoning ordinance approved by the City Council on January 11th. He points out makes several points. The MDR decision made by the Planning Board has been fully vetted leading up to its inclusion within the proposed ordinance. He goes on to indicate that there was significant support by the public to designate the Kimball parcel as MDR. He has further suggested and argued that the MDR mapping designation is in harmony with the 2011-2018 comprehensive plan. It reminds you that the MU4 zone was eliminated early in the approximately 2-year zoning revision process, and the R5MU zone was simply a concept brought forth by city staff to the planning board later in the ordinance review process. The R5MU concept was soundly rejected by the planning board during a public polling. It is very hard for me, and this is my own personal comment, to believe that public servants with reasonable critical thinking skills and the best interests of Saco citizens in mind would allow this R5MU concept to move aggressively forward as it has. Ward 5 City Councilor Minthorn has publicly stated that he currently disapproves of mega large multifamily residential development occurring on the Kimball Deering parcel. Assuming that is true, why is there such a concerted, expeditious effort to allow that type of development to occur on the Kimball Deering site under the new ordinance? It seems quite clear to many, including myself, that this hastily orchestrated and aggressively pursued R5MU concept is likely being driven by the influence of an out-of-state-based real estate developer standing to gain significantly from it. We have received no public comment from our city officials to the contrary. We remain hopeful that our public officials will support land use rights promoted by their constituents. If not, we run the risk of hastily introducing a real estate land use that will permanently change the character of our community. And once that first dramatic change occurs, the character of our community will be changed forever. So in conclusion, I would respectfully request that you soundly reject the first reading contemplated in agenda item Roman numeral 9, letter G. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Up next, we have David Plavin, identifier. David, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute and state your name and address for the record in 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. David Plavin, 2 Surf Street. As Mother Nature has reminded us a couple of times in recent weeks, she has no mercy when wreaking havoc on our shoreline. Each pounding demonstrates that our defenses have been so severely weakened, we hold our breath each time she winds up and wallops us. My intention tonight is not to be critical. On the contrary, I'm pleased that the mayor, city administrator, and Councilor Berman are intensifying their efforts to get something done. We all need to support them and push for action, and we need to lean heavily on the state and federal government to step up now. My intention is to keep reminding everyone of how important this is. The future of our coastal lands and property is clearly at stake. To stop talking about this would be to concede defeat. This is a citywide and Saco Bay-wide issue. We need to keep everyone behind it. That starts here with our leadership and our city council. I remain confident that you're all supportive, but an occasional reminder, whether verbal or courtesy of the weather gods, keeps us focused. And thank you. And also, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to acknowledge that the city's Department of Works, its response to the damage to public lands along the Saco coast keeps those of us that are here in the winter functioning. We are greatly appreciative and look forward to a day when we see a lot less of them. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Up next, let's see if we can get Kelly Archer back here. Kelly, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and provide your 3 minutes of comments.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you very much. I am Kelly Archer, living at 185 Bradley Street. I am in hopes to see the planning board reappointments and approval of Jeff Brochu and Sean Nicholas on the next council agenda prior to their term expirations on February 28th. Their experience, knowledge, thoughtfulness, and thoroughness are invaluable to the planning board and to the city of Saco and are deeply appreciated by this community. We all thank you, Sean and Jeff, for your extreme due diligence, transparency, and holding the city and its process accountable. We're extremely fortunate to have you represent the city of Saco. As it is well known for the last 9 months as a ZORS member, I am very vocal of the staff-driven and written R5MU district amendments being unilaterally pushed through the system. Are you now complicit in those efforts? On November 4th, 2019, John Flatley Company's agent, Chad Brannon, Fieldstone Land Consultants' letter was read to the council. I had a hard time finding it. It was read by Denise Clobet on a video recording. No hard copy until the minutes, no staff disclosure, no transparency, no copy of the letter forwarded to the planning board or ZORS members until the planning board workshop meeting on April 14th, 2020, 5 months after it was read out loud to the council. How could you withhold this knowledge and letter from the planning board ZORS members in our due diligence? I did not know the Flatley Company was upset with the staff while we members modified and merged the MU4 into the MDR zone, thereby removing Flatley's vision of development for this land. I did not know of the planning staff's recommendation with their letter of support was to delay the vote on the proposed zoning revisions until we found out on April 14th, 2020 planning board workshop packet on page 58 with staff stating this process could be retained with a Route 5 limited residential zone. The birth of the R5MU is now born. Fast forward, the planning board, ZORS, and citizens concluded through many public hearings at the planning board on December 2nd, 2020, recommendation to council was that this land remain MDR. Staff still insisted to write the R5MU amendment and present to council on January 4th and 11th meetings without due process. Council delays the adoption of the ZORS packet by 90 days. City attorney recommends the 3 staff-driven and written amendments go back to the planning public hearing on 2/2, which the R5MU was 5th on the agenda and will be concluded tomorrow on February 9th. And now it is the first reading for you tonight. Deja vu of the staff-driven I2 zone amendment all over again. Hurry the process before being duly processed by the planning board first. Are you complicit to meet the demands of a developer by the rush, the push, and the insistence of an R5MU? Does your silence speak to your agreement? I sincerely hope you remove the first reading of the Lincoln Street parcel tonight, follow due process, and slow all of this down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly. Excuse me. Next up, we have identifier Dan Lasky. Dan, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and provide your 3 minutes of comments to the council.
Yeah, hi. My name is Dan Lasky. I live at 23 Skyline Drive in Saco. A couple of things. I just want to say I'm 100% behind the comments of Phil Hatch and Attorney Bannon. 100% behind the comments of Kelly Archer. I belong to this neighborhood group along with at least a few hundred people here. And this has got a lot of thought. People have put a lot of time and effort into it. And it makes, if you've read these things and read what Attorney Bannon said or what Kelly had said to say, I don't understand how we can be moving forward. How can we be voting on something that's not even been vetted out of the planning board yet? I guess one thing for tonight, I know people usually ask questions, but they never get an answer, really. I'm not sure. I never see anybody get an answer. I would like to know why it's always 30 days. Why, Mr. Mayor, did you want 90 days? What was the reasoning? Why did we need that extra 60 days? It's very, very, very uncommon. It's legal to do, but it's extremely uncommon, from what I've been told. That's about it. I just, and for all the councilors, you folks all put a lot of time and effort into this. This is soundly not good for the city of Saco, not just for our area. It's going to affect the whole city of Saco. To change the zoning. It was MDR. It's still in the planning board. I really don't know how you could change that. Honest to God, I don't understand how you could be voting on this. Mr. Minithorn, again, you and I had a couple conversations, but now you've come out and you're against large projects and projects like this. Now's the time for you tonight to step up and start helping the residents that you're elected to support and defend. And the rest of you councilors, it's your job also to defend and support the city of Saco. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Up next, we have identifier Robert Lawton. Robert, you've been allowed to unmute. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and present your 3 minutes of comments to the council.
Hello, my name is Robert Lawton. I live on 13 Evergreen Drive. And I would like to also, as the predecessors talking about item G, the rezoning to the Route 5 MU, I believe it should remain as the MDR zoning, and I support Phil Hatch and the attorney Ben and all the other speakers that have just spoke about that. I think it's out of place with looking at the type of housing all around the area. It's in a downtown, almost or next to downtown location. It would dump a lot of traffic out onto our streets, which probably are not designed for that. There would be a lot of increased services from the town, you know, water, sewer, utilities, road care, road maintenance, plowing, all these other things, electrical for the street lights, whatever else comes with that. And I just don't support this at all. I think it's out of character for where it is. And I think it would not serve the town long-term having that type of a unit put in that location. And also echoing the other folks about the fact that it hasn't come out of the planning board meeting yet. It's on the agenda to further discuss tomorrow night. And so I also think it's out of place to have it on this agenda for tonight. And I also support removing it from the agenda for this evening for the town council, city council. And that's all I have. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak up and talk to the town council. I've never done that before, so I really appreciate the opportunity to speak up and let my feelings be known. And I thank you for all of the work that you've done supporting the city. So that's all I have for tonight. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Take care.
Thanks.
Up next, we have identifier JC. JC, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and provide your 3 minutes of comments to the council.
Good evening. This is Jane Karen. I live at 264 Lincoln Street in Saco. And thank you for allowing us to speak. And I just want to remind you that the messages from the citizens is very clear. Your responsibility is to serve the citizens of the city of Saco is very clear. I and a very large group of Saco citizens support comments made by Phil Hatch, Kelly Archer, and the other respected citizens speaking tonight to please remove this first reading on the agenda since it is a premature action for tonight's city council meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane. If there's anyone else who would like to provide public comment to the city council, please use the raise hand feature of the Zoom platform or *9 from a cellular phone. Up next, we have identifier Rand Clark. Rand, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and present your 3 minutes of comments to the council.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I really want to just ask a clarification. I'm under item F. Should I speak now or should we wait and speak when that item is addressed? I'm just as a matter of clarity, understanding.
Rand, you should provide your public comment now, as item F is a first reading and not a public hearing that will come following a first reading. The process is always in changing ordinances that there is a first reading, a public hearing, and then a second and final reading.
So you would like us to comment now? Okay,
This is the time for public comment.
okay, great. Greg? Okay, so really, I'm Rand Clark. We live at 41 River Ridge Drive in Dayton, Maine. It's in reference to item F. We purchased 2 parcels there 12 years ago, and then just this past year, a 3rd parcel. And I have Greg Schinberg, who is a consultant representing my wife and I. And I would like to ask him to cover a few items in connection with this. Do you see his hand? Is his hand up?
I don't see his hand up. I do now.
Okay, great. Then I'm available, Susan and I are available to answer any questions you might have, but I'd like to yield it now to Greg, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me, Mayor and members of the council?
Greg, we can hear you if you just state your name and address for the record.
Yes.
And provide your comments to the council.
Good evening. My name is, excuse me, Greg Schinberg of Schinberg Consulting out of Portland, Maine at 181 State Street, Suite 303. This project I know has come before you, going back to planning board, and I think it's important to note that what the Clarks are looking for is only approximately 1.5 acres of land to get changed from the new LDR to the I zone. And if you look at that in context, of their entire parcel, it's only about 4% of their entire parcel of 63 acres. It's a very, very small portion. And if you look at the exhibit that I provided, the colored one that was presented to the council, and it's on page 116, it kind of shows how the Clark's property rather comes in behind several parcels along Flag Pond Road. What we're looking to do is provide a natural buffer to access this industrial land that's really landlocked. And it's also important to note that of that 63 acres, most of it is wet. And I know there's been concerns by neighbors and others that talked about the increased traffic and whatnot. But in reality, only about 12 acres of the entire industrial zone land is developable. And it's important to note that because it's not going to have a huge increase. You're not going to be able to have a 70-acre industrial park like over at Mill Pond. I think that it's also important to note that in your own packet on page 115, it talks about how the impact on the traffic is really minimal, and that this has been planned for the Flag Pond area to handle more traffic in the future. And when you come down there, it's pretty easy access to turn both north and south on Route 1. The other thing I think that's very important to note is that 50% of the parcels that the Clarks own are within 450 feet of the turnpike. That's really close to the turnpike. It's not naturally a residential parcel. It really should be industrial land. And they've owned it for a long time with the understanding that a parcel that close to the highway naturally should be an industrial parcel. I think that it's also important to note that when you look at the entire context of the rezoning north of I-195, there's only 2 very small areas of the LDR zone One is on Flag Pond Road and the other is over off of Cascade Brook. If you look at that map, almost the entire area is either purple or red, meaning the Portland zone or the industrial zone. And I'll finish up by saying I think this is good for the city. It's good tax base with very little services. And I think it's something that should be really considered by the council as a benefit, a great benefit to the city. That's it.
Thank you, Greg. Up next, we have identifier Jeffrey Hultgren. Jeff, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and provide your 3 minutes of comments to the council.
Hi, this is Jeff Hultgren, 23 Forest Street, Saco, Maine. I'd like to voice my support for the opinion of Mr. Hatch to remove the MU5 from tonight's agenda. I feel for tonight, not only am I speaking for myself, but my elderly neighbors, my non-English speaking neighbors, when I say that this project is going to significantly impact our way of life, our quality of life, and it's only going to turn Saco for the worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Last call for public comment. Up next, we have identifier Frank Dumas. Frank, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and provide your comments to the council.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you. My name is Frank Dumas. I live at 310 Lincoln Street in Saco. Just want to echo the comments of my fellow neighbors and citizens concerning item 9G on tonight's council agenda. If you please give it some serious thought to not voting on this, I would greatly appreciate it. And I thank you for the time to allow me to speak.
Thank you, Frank. Up next, we have identifier Katrina. Katrina, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and provide your 3 minutes of comments to council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is Katrina at 116 Flag Pond Road. And all I'm just curious about is, I guess, why someone that lives in Dayton can, I understand real estate, but I don't agree with the fact that they can kind of dictate or try to dictate what happens on Flag Pond Road. They don't live here. Neither does Mr. Schinberg, who lives in Portland or wherever. And he says the traffic on Flag Pond Road is not bad. And I understand it's not necessarily going to be a residential development because of the wetland. I understand that, but I would believe that there's maybe some underlying factors, some other things that are in the works that we don't know about. And that's why he has an attorney representing his real estate in this XYZ. But so still against rezoning on Flag Pond Road. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Katrina. Up next, we have identifier Bill Clow. Bill, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and provide your 3 minutes of comments to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
My name is William Clow, live at 257 Lincoln Street, and I just want to mimic all of the things my neighbors have said. We just don't understand why it's being rushed. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Up next is identifier Dan Lasky. Dan, you've been unmuted. Again, you've already spoken here once, and public comment is usually reserved for one. However, it is in the determination of the mayor whether folks can speak again, and I'm allowing you to do so. So please go ahead and unmute, state your name and address for the record, and provide your comments to council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Dan Lasky, 23 Skyline Drive, Saco, Maine. I just want to be quick. Excuse me. If one of the councilors, could you please, again, just sometime tonight, answer me why 90 days, not 30 days? I greatly appreciate that answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Last call for public comment. Moving on from public comment, next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. There are no minutes to approve. There is a consent agenda item under article or Roman numeral number 8, and that is item A, the abatement for Ferry Beach Park Association for fiscal year 2018-2019. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Council Archer?
I'll second.
Sorry about that. I couldn't click the button. I'd like to actually have a discussion on this and request that it's removed from consent to action item.
Without objection, we'll take that up as action item A. So there's no consent agenda. We move on to item 9, action items. What is new item A, abatement for Ferry Beach Park Association for fiscal year 2018-2019? Councilor Berman.
1 second here. All right. The Ferry Beach Park Association is a not-for-profit, benevolent, and charitable organization that currently owns 9 separate parcels in the city of Saco. In 2007, a settlement agreement between Ferry Beach Park Association and the city of Saco determined that portions of 3 parcels, map 3, lot 2001, map 3, lot 73, map 3, lot 75, were to remain taxable. After a series of communications during 2018 and 2019 between Ferry Beach Park and the city assessor's office, including a site visit on April 25th, 2019 by the city assessor, it was determined that the parcels taxable under the settlement agreement met the burden of proof to be exempt from taxation, excluding $72,000 for the ecology school offices. 36 MRS 41-1 allows municipal officials to make reasonable abatement as they consider proper after 1 year and within 3 years of equipment. There are 7 exhibits, A through G. Be it ordered that the City Council, in good faith, approve the abatement in the amount of $16,324.40 to Ferry Beach Park Association for the fiscal year of 2018-2019. I move to approve this order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Discussion? Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first I want to say if I'm fine with the abatement, that's fine. But I do have a question. Unfortunately, you can't ask questions under consent items, so I had to bring it here. My question is in the amount of why we're still using $72,000. If you look at the agreement, it specifically says, it actually identifies the ecology school offices shall be taxable at a value of $72,000 as of April 1st, 2006, or that's 15 years ago. The intent of this was not to have 72,000 in perpetuity forever to be the value of those offices, and why hasn't that been taken into consideration? Now, I do understand that this probably won't have a significant impact on what's being abated, but it is something that should be recognized. And my question is, if it was oversight, so be it, that happens. Or if there was an intention, what was that intention to make it 72,000, considering it's not taking 15 years of growth in our community?
Thank you, Councilor Archer. City Administrator Canrath, who do we have on that can answer that question?
I don't know if Nick Desjardins is. He's available. Nick.
City Assessor Desjardins, thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, guys. Yeah, this is a kind of unusual situation, as far as what the settlement agreement stated in 2007 in terms of actually the portions of the parcels that were exempt at the time and how that value carried over. So it wasn't really properly as far as, okay, this is the portion that's exempt. As far as what happened each and every year going forward to 2018, as far as really specifically identifying that portion of the parcel. So the easiest way to do this was to look at the agreement, look at what we were assessing as taxable, and use the 72,000 as the portion based on the settlement agreement that was going to remain taxable as ecology school offices. So it was an easy decision in that respect. Certainly go back and look at it, and if you'd like, Counselor, and really look at each year to make sure the proper adjustments were made each year based on the city adjustments that were done from the settlement agreement to what that exact value should be in that specific fiscal year. So that will just be going back to that year and looking at exactly when market adjustments were done, what adjustments were made to that property, and how to properly increase that value based on what was done, over the course of, we're talking 14 years. So if that's something that you want me to do, Councilor Archer, I can definitely do that and come up with another number that would show a more accurate value of what that would be as of 4/1/18.
I think a better option would be to not go back and look year by year for the last 16 years. Maybe we should just let that go. But what we should be doing is today's the timestamp. Why don't we use today's numbers and then use that going forward? I don't want to be putting a lot of staff time, because time is money, into this project. But why can't we correct it, use today's new assessed value? It won't be 72. I doubt it. I'm sure it went up in value. Readjust those numbers to be correct for now, and then use this as the timestamp moving forward. Rather than fixing the past, we can fix it by updating it now and not using 16-year-old data to assess a value. So
yeah, we could.
I would like to put a motion to table this with those suggestions just being reflected, so that the abatement value is accurately reflected in today's market.
Motion has been made by Councilor Archer to table. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor.
School Board, excuse me, Councilor Johnston.
I'm willing to second Councilor Archer's motion, but I have a question for the administrator prior to that, if that's all right. It's unrelated to the. It hasn't been seconded, so the motion is not before us. So
I'll withdraw my motion for consideration in a few minutes.
All right, thank you. So again, I don't really have any issues with what's before us, but one of the things I found curious in the packet, in that settlement agreement, it does not have the city administrator listed or signed, and I was just kind of concerned that the city entered into a settlement agreement that didn't have representation by the city administrator on behalf of the city, and obviously that predates your time here, and it goes back 14 or 16 years, whatever it is. But is that common on these particular settlement agreements, or just something that was missed? What do we think?
I think there would usually be a city administrator signature on this, would be my thought. Nick, you've seen other agreements maybe. Would it be standard practice to have someone on behalf of the city?
I mean, this is a very unusual agreement. I would think that I haven't really seen an agreement like this before. This is really depicting portions of parcels. Yeah, so I would think that the city administrator at the time would sign it as, in their capacity. So sure, that would be a little surprising, but I have not seen an agreement like this before.
All right, thank you. I'd just say, going forward on any type of settlement, we really should have the administrator's signature on that document. I spoke to people that were on the council at the time this occurred, and they weren't actually aware of it. So that's kind of concerning, but it's in the past. So just moving forward, let's make sure we have it done properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I took part in several meetings with city staff as well as these people. There was considerable confusion as to the tax status, when the abatement should occur, when the property changed status to being tax exempt, and the Ferry Beach Association made a good effort to communicate with the city and do what they should have done. I think to hold them in further confusion for longer over the number they thought they were going to pay would be a disservice to them. They're a tax exempt organization that provides a service to the city and has really tried in good faith to meet their obligations. So I support Councilor Archer's suggestion that going forward, we might update the numbers and look into this further, but I'd urge us to vote in support of this abatement for now.
Thank you, Councilor Berman. Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to echo what Mike said. I think we should pass the abatement and be done with that. And then if we want to re-examine documents, let's task staff with re-examining the documents.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Is any of the council interested in hearing from Joe Savisky, who is a representative on behalf of the Ferry Beach Park Association? If there's no objection, which I'm not hearing any, Joe, you've been allowed to speak. Please go ahead and unmute, and maybe you can answer the question that Councilor Archer posed earlier about the issue with the $72,000 for the ecology school offices.
I'd be happy to, Mr. Mayor. Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and thank you for the council's consideration of this abatement this evening. So you might have gathered from the discussion already from Mr. Desjardins that this is somewhat of a unique situation. And the $72,000 was a number I pulled from the settlement agreement, which was based on the ecology school's occupation of a portion of one building on the property. And this abatement we're requesting relates to taxes paid by Ferry Beach Park Association for the 18-19 fiscal year. So for that fiscal year, the relevant date for determining the tax status would be April 1, 2018. So in going over these issues with my client, Ferry Beach, what we determined was the life estate from the former executive director had terminated long before that date, but there was still a very small presence of the ecology school in one of those buildings on that particular lot as of April 1, 2018. Going forward, the ecology school has vacated the property altogether. So going forward, the property should be completely tax exempt, and the assessor has, I believe, granted an abatement with respect to the following year, the 1920 year. But anyway, so that's the status of the property now. It's completely tax exempt property now, but as of April 1, 2018, there was a tenant in a portion of one of the site buildings, and the $72,000 figure was just what I could gather from the settlement agreement in the absence of any better information. So I would be happy to take any questions that councilors might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Savitsky. Council Archer?
So first of all, I want to say thank you to Joe. Is that Savisky?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, first I want to say thank you for clarifying. Unfortunately, we didn't see this document. I don't believe it came out to us until Thursday, so I didn't really have a lot of time to get clarifying. And then when it's on the consent, you can't discuss it without bringing it on the floor. So I do want to recognize that I'm not going to be putting a motion to table. I'm actually, again, when I first addressed it, I said I was in favor of it. Some of these clarifying questions have helped solve the reason why the valuation was different. And I also want to just present to council that we can abate for any amount we want, to be honest. It doesn't have to be based on what the assessor says or not. But now that I've got some clarification, some historical knowledge based on this, I would like that in the future to reflect any changes to the new current value. And I think possibly we should relook at this contract and re-sign it, redo it, just because it possibly is illegal because no city official with the authorizing authority possibly signed it. So what I'm just suggesting is you take the current contract, redo it as is, and put a new timestamp as well. Let's clean this up, move it forward, and then I don't think it'll be an issue for a nonprofit that we have utilized before in the past. I know our Save Our Shores, the Saco Save Our Shores, we met there. They let that group hold it. I went there to learn. So I do know they contribute to the city, and I'd like to just get it all cleaned up and let's move forward.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. Any other questions for Mr. Savisky? Any other questions for City Assessor Desjardins? Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this item? Hearing no further discussion, a roll call vote on this item. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to what was item B, or what was item A, which is now item B, and that is a final reading amendments to Chapter 64 -dogs, and that is Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. After growing concerns had been brought to council and city staff regarding the city dog ordinance policies, it was determined that updates were necessary regarding dog being under voice control, running at large, and specifying areas where dogs should be restricted. Amendments to the dog ordinances include updated definitions, leash laws, and specifications of when and where a dog can be off leash. The amended dog ordinance restricts dogs from being on sports fields and playing fields and lays out the locations of each field. It requires all dogs to be on a leash while on the beach, at the beach, from April 1st through September 30th. From October 1st through March 31st, dogs can be on the beach without a leash. It also requires that all dogs be leashed on public land within the city of Saco, except for the dog park located on School Street and the beach from October 1st through March 31st. The updated dog ordinance gives council the ability to set fines for those not adhering to the ordinances, as well as late fees for owners who do not licensing their dog by the set deadline. I move to adopt the amendments to Chapter 64, Article 2, dogs.
Motion's been made by Councilor Archer. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Discussion? Councilor Berman, then Councilor Johnston, Councilor Berman.
Yeah, I'd like to move to amend this motion in order to add the 5 American Kennel Club suggestions to the exceptions to dogs at large. Those are found on page 45 of our packet, which is also on Director Summers' memo to us dated February 8th, 2021. So again, I'm adding those 5 exemptions to the dogs at large to section 64.6.
Second.
Councilor Berman has made an amendment to adopt the AKC recommended exemptions under Article 64.6 on page 35. And Councilor Johnson has seconded that motion. Discussion on that amendment only, on the amendment only. Councilor Johnson.
It's up from before.
Okay, would you like to wait until we get back to the main motion?
Well, Council Berman actually amended the motion that I was going to put forth, but I have another one. But I have nothing to say on this one other than I support it.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the amendment only? The amendment to adopt the AKC exemptions as proposed? Councilor Archer? Councilor Archer, you're muted.
Sorry, looking at 2 screens, I had to move mine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a question about when we're talking about training, it doesn't really specify certified trainer. And that's a concern because I believe I could say I'm training my dog and I'm not a certified trainer. I believe I can do basic Maslow, stuff like that. Pavlov, I meant to say. Sorry, psychology professors out there. The basics, but again, I think when we're talking about field triers or formal obedience, it literally states, it doesn't put anything related to certified. And I would like to amend the amendment that's presented, and I am doing it this way because it follows the order, to just add when the dog is accompanied by its owner or keeper and certified trainer, just something simple to that nature. I think that would suffice because I could see just anybody saying they're training their dog because that is legit. Anybody can train. However, we really are, the intent is the certified trainer.
You're under section 4 of the AKC recommendations, correct?
Sorry about that. I didn't clarify. Section 1, could it work under 4 as well?
I think 4 is clear.
But okay, 1 and 4 are 2 different types of, I don't know what to say, usage. So maybe we need it under both. So my initial one was to be by its owner or keeper by a certified trainer, and anybody else can put it in for 4. If they have any suggestions, I'm open to where it would best be presented.
Councilor Berman, are you willing to make that a friendly amendment to your current amendment?
No.
No. Okay. Okay.
So I would
amendment
just
to the
one. Mine will just be for item 1 by its owner or keeper by a certified trainer. That's it. Keep it simple.
So the amendment to the amendment that has been offered by Councilor Archer. Is there a second to the amendment by Councilor Archer?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. This is the amendment to add in the word trainer after by its owner or keeper. Perhaps removing the word or, creating a comma, putting a comma after keeper, and then put or trainer.
Certified.
Is that my understanding? Certified trainer. Thank you.
Point of clarification, is it an or certified trainer or is it an and certified trainer? Is a certified trainer required to be there or optional to be there?
Council Archer, are you adding, requiring the trainer to be there with the owner or handler? Or are you?
No, it's the it would, the certified trainer has to be present, not necessarily the owner, but the part of the puzzle is make sure there's a certified person on site.
So add in the word "and" certified trainer. Okay. So we've clarified what the language will be on the amendment to the amendment. Councilor Johnston, you have your hand up. Is this on the amendment to the amendment, or is this on the previous amendment?
I was hoping not to make this overly confusing for you. Goodness.
We can always do follow-up amendments, folks. We don't have to take care of all of it right out of the gate.
I agree. I'm not presenting an amendment. I'm just thinking that maybe this is an easier way to do this amendment. Because the way I had this originally written was during field trials or formal obedience, agility, or similar training periods when the dog is accompanied by its owner, keeper, or certified handler, and they have the express permission of the owner or occupant of the property on which the dogs are being trained.
Is that a motion? Because if that's a motion, I'll withdraw mine.
I mean, it can be. I didn't want to do an amendment to the amendment to the amendment. So if you're going to withdraw yours, then I would make that amendment.
Mr. Mayor, I withdraw my initial amendment in support of Councilor Johnston's.
So on the amendment to the amendment, Councilor Archer has withdrawn his motion. Councilor Purdy, are you okay with withdrawing your second?
Yes.
Thank you. The amendment to the amendment is no longer. Now we are back to the first amendment made by Councilor Berman, seconded by Councilor Johnston, and that is to adopt the AKC exemptions that is on page 43 and 44 of the packet that reflect Article 64-6. Councilor Johnston, you have your hand up, or you want to speak on this? Or do we want to take an action on this and then you can amend the action on this item?
I would like to amend number 1 that Councilor Berman submitted so that it reads, during field trials or formal obedience, agility, or similar training periods when the dog is accompanied by its owners, keeper, or certified handler, and has the express permission of the owner or occupant of the property on which the dogs are being trained.
I would accept that language as a friendly amendment if that makes the process easier.
That does make the process easier.
I'm okay with that language as a friendly amendment.
And Councilor Johnston, since you're making the motion, I imagine that you're seconding the motion, you would be willing to make that a friendly amendment as well. Okay.
All right, so we're through that.
Now that the friendly amendment has been added into the amendment put forward by Councilor Berman and Councilor Johnston on the amendment only as a whole. On the amendment only as a whole, not the main motion. Or any further discussion? A roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes. The amendment passes 7-0. Back to the main motion as amended. on the main motion as amended. Any further discussion? Councilor Johnson.
Okay, so I would like to move to amend 64-8, animal noise. It currently reads, no owners shall permit or allow any animal to bark, howl, or make other sounds common to its species if such sounds reoccur in steady, rapid succession for 10 minutes or more, or recur or reoccur intermittently for 1 hour or more during the hours of 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. This shall not apply if an animal is provoked by trespassing people or animals on private property on which the animal is situated, or by other legitimate causes of provocation, and does not apply to a dog guarding, working, or herding livestock, nor a dog used for hunting. I'll stop there.
So you would add in the words, and does not apply to dogs that are herding for livestock, cattle, or hunting. Did I miss anything?
Correct, and I put a time period from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. that dogs can't be, barking continuously. I found this to be more in line with surrounding communities' ordinance.
So it'll read, and does not apply to dogs herding for livestock, cattle, or hunting from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Or you could put it after 1 hour or more.
So, and does not apply to dogs herding for livestock, cattle, or hunting for 1 hour or more.
If we go back up to the, I know this is super confusing. If we go up to the first sentence where it says no owner shall permit or allow, at the bottom or at the end of that sentence, it says 1 hour or more. That's where I would put during the hours of 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then add the part about the dogs guarding, herding, and all that at the very end of the second sentence.
Okay, so the amendment is to add in, after the words 1 hour or more in the first sentence, add in 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then add the words, and does not apply to dogs herding for the purposes of livestock and cattle or hunting at the end of the second sentence. That's the amendment, Councilor Johnston?
It is, but I'd like to add more to it.
Councilor Johnston, perhaps you should email myself and the city administrator a copy of the suggested amendments, just so that we can get it into the record.
I will if it's adopted. Following that, the AKC had proposed some changes where they had put, upon receipt of a complaint, the animal control officer shall investigate, and if satisfied of the truth of the complaint, issue a warning in writing to the owner or keeper of the dog that violations result in the imposition of a civil penalty. Any person found by animal control officer or affirmed in writing by 2 or more persons having separate residences in a neighborhood to be in subsequent violation shall be subject to the fines as listed in 64-16 violations and penalties. I'd like to add that. I just think it adds more of a understanding for control for animal control officers as to what they should be doing.
Councilor Johnston, you broke up a little bit. Which section was that were you looking for? That change?
It would go under 64-8 animal noise, and it had come out of the AKC's proposed language.
And that is the second paragraph on the second page of the AKC kennel, where they recommended upon receipt of the complaint, the animal control officer shall investigate and, if satisfied of the truth of the complaint, issue a warning writing to the owner or keeper of the dog. That's the language that you're referring to in the second page of that document on page 44.
Correct.
Okay. So just so I have it correctly, and so everyone listening has it correctly, the amendment at this moment in time is to add in under section 64(8). In the first sentence, after the words 1 hour or more, add from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then at the end of the second sentence, add in and does not apply to dogs herding for the purposes of livestock, cattle, or hunting. And then another paragraph, adding in the second paragraph of the AKC letter, second page of the AKC letter, second paragraph on page 44. That's the amendment.
It sounds correct. The only thing that you may have wrong is it's 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Thank you. On the amendment, is there a second to the amendment?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Discussion on the amendment, Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you. I want to take the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. out. I want it 24 hours a day. I work from home, and if the neighbor's dog is barking at 10 o'clock in the morning for an hour, it's a major pain. And I have numerous neighbors who have had numerous complaints against several dogs that are in earshot of my home. And it goes on some days all day long. It doesn't go on at night because the owner's home then, but they leave the dog out all day long and cause a disruption to the entire neighborhood. So if we're going to have a noise ordinance, it ought to be 24 hours a day. For all those people that work from home, which many more of us are now, given COVID, I just think that putting a time on it, that's all well and good, but you still need to be a responsible pet owner during 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I completely understand where Councilor Minthorn's coming from. However, I mean, when does it really stop? I can sit here and complain that I have people that squeal their tires when they're pulling out of the gas station. They pull over at the gas station, they blare their music all day long. Our noise ordinance for the good neighbor is along those same time frame, those hours. It's like a 12-hour period. And every other ordinance I found that actually stipulates this is all the night hours. And I get it. People leave their dogs out. I just don't think you really can legislate good dog ownership, to be honest. And I'm concerned about, what's the cost going to actually be of trying to have animal control officers run around every single complaint they get of a barking dog. I mean, I think 10 minutes is really on the extreme side, considering other ordinance I've read. But I'm fine with that because I'm recognizing what, Councilor Minthorn saying is that there are people that have dogs that they leave out all day and bark. So 10 minutes I'm fine with, but I think that, during a period of time, obviously, the nighttime is probably more concerning to most, and that's how our other ordinance, deals with noise. So I just think it should be more consistent along those lines, but that's me. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnston. Councilor Minthorn.
Again, as far as enforcement of the ordinance goes, most, not all of us, have smartphones that allow audio recordings. So I think we're not speaking of hundreds of dogs in the community that this is a problem. We're talking a few dogs in a few select neighborhoods from time to time. And I think if a neighbor uses their phone and records the dog and can sit there and play it, as I have done with our police department prior to our animal control officer coming on board, and say, here, this is what we're hearing, here's the timestamp, and you can see it. For 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it went on. It made it very easy to enforce. Are there going to be some of those nuisance animals? Yes. But if they're nuisance animals from that standpoint, I really have a hard time saying, well, it's only a nuisance after 7 p.m. For all of those people that are retired and like their peace and quiet or work from home and are trying to do their job, they should not be burdened because it's this time of day or that time of day with that nuisance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minthorn. Any further discussion on the amendment to the amendment?
Is that an amendment from Councilor?
I'm sorry, amendment to the main motion.
Was that a amendment from Councilor Minthorn for the hour change?
I'll amend it to delete the time, period. So any duration of 10 minutes or longer, it is. That's it. It's a nuisance. Done. Move on.
I'll second that, but we may need a discussion on full-time animal control officer at a different time. Can't be part of this, but.
So there's been an amendment, and now there's an amendment to the amendment.
Yes.
And so the amendment to the amendment is to remove Councilor Johnston's proposed 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. At the end of the first sentence in 64-8. And that is Councilor Minthorn's amendment, seconded by Councilor Archer. And on that amendment to the amendment only, on removing the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. discussion. Hearing no discussion and seeing no counselor seeking recognition or roll call vote on the amendment to the amendment. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston.
No.
The motion passes 6-1. Back to the motion as amended. So, excuse me, back to the amendment as amended. Councilor Archer.
Hold on, just clear. We're not on the main motion yet, correct? I have
We
an
are
amendment.
not on the
to
main
present.
motion.
Okay,
We
I'll
are on
withdraw
an
until we get to
amendment.
that section.
Councilor McPhail.
Just to clarify, which one are we back on?
We are on the amendment to add in, it's been amended, so we are now just
With the
adding
time.
in, we are removing the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. that was in at the end of the first sentence. We are
Is there-
adding in.
Yeah.
And does not apply to the dogs herding for the purposes of livestock, cattle, and or hunting. And we are adding in the second paragraph of the AKC kennel letter on page 2 in the bottom of that section. That is the amendment made by Councilor Johnston and seconded by Councilor Berman.
Okay, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. On the amendment only at this point. Discussion. Seeing no discussion and no counselor seeking recognition, a roll call vote on the amendment only. Councilor Archer.
Aye to the amendment.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. back to the main motion. Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make an amendment to 6410. I'm not looking to change the content, just the wording. I believe the city should be more culturally appropriate and in the times, and I think we should be changing as used in section B to say all female dogs and replace that with the term that we currently use as bitch and he. I believe it should now reflect the times and be a tad more culturally competent. I'm sure this is a 1970s term. And again, it's on page 49 of the packet, 64.9. Just change it to say female dogs and he, the owner of any female dog. And that's it.
I think that's the old ordinance.
Councilor Archer, yeah, that was already changed in this section of the document. You can see in 6413 on page 39, that was an issue that Director Summer brought up and was very important to him, and he wanted to make sure we got that change, and that has been in there. So,
Gotcha. Yeah, I did mention that before. I just happened to look at one of the 215 pages we have. So I'm looking at, I guess, the older version in our packet.
I think you just wanted to make another amendment. I think that's
no, I withdraw my amendment. I wanted to make another withdrawal of an amendment for a motion.
Councilor McPhail.
Thank you. Section 64-22, the violations and penalties. At one of our previous meetings, Councilor Johnston had put in the option of the penalties being used towards the dog park for improvements. Where we have the last paragraph stating the ordinance shall be recovered to the use of the city of Saco and deposited in the separate account required by 7 MRSA section 3945. Can that be identified as an account with Saco Park and Rec for the benefit of the dog park?
That was my next amendment.
Nope.
But I have a question on it because that section 3945 makes reference to all fees and court fines, which these are municipal fines. So I would think that we could do this. Does that seem correct to city staff?
Director Summer, would you like to answer that question? Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. I was talking to Chief Clement about this topic after you brought it up last week, Councilor Johnson. It would only apply to civil penalties only, not for the anything that has to do with court or federal fees of that nature. It would just, so you have to read it as civil penalties only. That would go to the dog park account.
So in the proposed ordinance, you have all civil penalties collected pursuant to this ordinance shall be recovered to the use of city of Saco and deposited into a separate account required by 7 MRSA subsection 3945. You're saying
Correct.
that all civil penalties can be put into a park that would be available for. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor McPhail, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I would second.
Councilor Johnson, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I'm going to second her motion.
Councilor Johnson, are you making a motion?
No, I'm seconding Councilor McPhail's motion.
Yep, I had asked the question for clarification, but if we need to do a motion to reword, then we can do that. I'm not quite sure.
Do you, Councilor McPhail, I didn't hear an amendment from you, so do you want to make an amendment? Because it sounds like Councilor Johnson will either second or make an amendment.
Yes, if we need the amendment to reword to specify Saco Park and Rec Dog Park.
And where would you like to put that in there?
Don't.
in the last paragraph, it would state all civil penalties collected pursuant to this ordinance shall be recovered to the Saco Park and Rec Department and deposited into an account specified for the dog park.
In accordance with
With
7
section, yes.
MRSA subsection 3945.
Yes.
Okay, there's been an amendment made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Johnson has seconded. Discussion on the amendment now. Councilor Purdy?
Thank you. I went to Title VII and
Yeah.
it says, except for the $1 recording fee pursuant to section 3942 retained by the municipal clerk, all fees and court fines retained by municipalities must be kept in a separate account and must be used for the salaries and costs of animal control, enforcement of licensing laws, care of stray animals that are injured or abandoned, and the support of one or more approved animal shelters. Any money not expended for these purposes in the municipality's fiscal year does not lapse, but must be carried over to the next fiscal year. Kind of sounds to me like that might not be possible.
That was my point before, but it clearly states fees and court fines, as with these are civil penalties.
Director Summer, do you want to differentiate maybe the difference, or perhaps Chief Clements is on and we can promote him to differentiate the difference between the civil penalties and the clerk's all fees and court fines?
So my understanding was if you take in the violation of 64.8 and 64.9, which would be the animal noise as well as the animal waste, that funds, because that is a separate issue with the city of Saco, that funds can go to a separate account. If you talk about the penalties of a dog at large or a dangerous dog, those are more of a state issue, and that would go to court and so forth. That's how I interpret it when I talk to Chief Clement. So they're separate in those regards and the severity of the penalties. So that's how I would kind of look at it of that nature.
Thank you, Director Summer. Councilor Purdy, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it kind of sounds like we could possibly put the funds for fines for not disposing of the feces, right? And I'm sorry, I can't remember the other one right off. Those could go into a separate account for the dog parks.
And you had your hand.
Yes. Right? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Did you have another question? You had your hand up.
No, I think it was left up from the time before.
Oh, okay. Council Archer?
I was actually gonna just kind of piggyback on our director here. It's a home rule issue. The state does not prevent us from creating ordinances related to animal noise and animal control of waste. So it'd be my understanding that home rule would apply and the state would only have jurisdiction over the state laws. And the city ordinance would protect, we'd be able to use these two specific causes for the animal park.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. Any on the amendment? On the amendment only, any further discussion? Councilor Justin, did you have something on the amendment only?
I was just wondering if perhaps we should add in pursuant to 64-8 and 64-9, those fees will be deposited into the dog park. Because 7 MRSA section 3945, as we've read, really is talking about the dog licensing fees and civil or court ordered penalties. So I just thought maybe that would clarify what section of the ordinance those penalties would apply to the dog park.
Would you like to make that a friendly amendment? If Councilor McPhail is willing?
Yes, please.
Councilor McPhail, are you willing to add in, pursuant to subsection 64
Yes.
dash 8?
And 64-9. Yes.
On the amendment only. Any further discussion? Roll call vote on the amendment only. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Amendment passes 7-0. Back to the main motion as amended several times.
Good.
Any further amendments? Any further discussion? Hearing no councilors seeking recognition, a roll call vote on the motion as amended. Council Archer.
Thank you to the American Kennel Club. Yes, for their assistance.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
The main motion as amended passes 7-0. Moving on to the next item in the agenda, which is our first reading, establishment of city historian, and that is Councilor Minthorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A city historian would provide advisory and informational assistance to the council, city staff, and boards and committees, as well as educational outreach for the general public and schools. This would be a part-time, non-employee position with a 3-year appointment nominated by the mayor and confirmed by the council. The proposed revision to the city code has been vetted by the city solicitor. The city council hereby approves the first reading of the establishment of a city historian and further moves to schedule a public hearing for February 22nd, 2021. I move to approve the order.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Minthorn, second by Councilor Johnston. Discussion on the city historian. Seeing no hands raised and no councilor seeking recognition, a roll call vote on the first reading of the city historian. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion passes 7-0. We are now at what was item C and is now item D. That is first reading, 146 Main Street Contract Zone. And that is page 56 in the packet, and that is Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. River House Realty LLC requests that the city consider approving a contract zone that would allow greater density for proposed residential units in the building at 146 Main Street. The parcel is about 6,969 square feet in area. It was acquired by the current owner in February of 2018. John Miley, manager of the property, has submitted a request for a contract zone review. The goal of converting existing office space on the second and third floors to 12 residential units. Given the size of the parcel and the required minimum lot area per dwelling unit, 1,500 square feet in the B3 zone, no more than 4 residential units would be possible. Mr. Miley's request is that the minimum lot area per dwelling unit be reduced to 560 square feet, which would allow 12 units to be created. This item was reviewed by the planning board at its January 5th meeting. The board arrived at a positive finding on each of the 4 standards found in section 230-1405F and voted to forward a positive recommendation to the council. I move to approve the first reading and adopt the findings in the contract zone document entitled Contract Zone Agreement by and between River House Realty LLC in the city of Saco dated January 5th, 2021, and to schedule a public hearing for March 1st, 2021 for the property identified as tax map 38 lot 4 as authorized by section 1405 of the zoning ordinance pursuant to 30A MRSA section 4352(8).
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Johnston, seconded by Councilor McPhail. Discussion on the first reading of the contract zone for 146 Main Street. Seeing no hands raised and seeing no councilors seeking recognition, a roll call vote on the first reading. Council Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. We are now at what was item D, now item E. That is the first reading, Chapter 81, the Camp Ellis parcels. Councilor Berman.
Yes, the city has received requests from 3 Camp Ellis property owners to consider the sale of 3 small city-owned parcels that abut parcels owned by the 3 individuals. In 2 of the cases, a conveyance of the small city-owned parcel would allow the 2 individuals to realize a somewhat larger property while still being non-conforming due to not meeting minimum lot size. The third would result in 2 non-conforming parcels being combined to result in a conforming lot in terms of lot area. The item was reviewed by the planning board at its January 5th meeting. The board forwards unanimous recommendation that the city retain each of the 3 lots and that maintenance and public access are optimized if the lots remain in the public realm. I move to approve the first reading and to schedule a public hearing for March 1st, 2021 for the Chapter 81 consideration of the properties identified as tax map 1, lots 31, 36, and 42.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman, second by Councilor Minthorn. Discussion? Seeing no hands raised and no councilor seeking recognition, a roll call vote on the first reading for Chapter 81. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to what was item D, now item F. And that is first reading zoning amendment to add master plan development as a permitted use in the Portland Road District. Councilor Johnston.
Point of order?
Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to bring up a point of order that we cannot take this up as of this week. I want to refer you back to the minutes of January 11th, in which the amendment made by myself and seconded by Councilor Purdy to amend the main motion to refer the proposed amendments to the planning board for a public hearing and report pursuant to section 230. As we have not received the report, as it has not happened, we cannot bring it back on the floor. This was a voted on measure, 6-1. So we can't bring it up this week. We have to wait until the report gets to us.
City Administrator Kane Rath, haven't we received a legal opinion that we can move forward on this?
Thank you,
As it is only the first reading and it is subject to final outcome when the planning board provides us with a report. And this is the first reading in a 3-series process of a first reading, followed by a public hearing, followed by a second and final reading.
That is my understanding. I believe Director Colvette or Pointer, our city planner Bob Hamlin can chime in, that we did consult with City Solicitor Tim Murphy as well as Attorney Jim Katsafikis who advised us on planning and land use issues that this was an acceptable process. But Denise or Bob, if you have anything to add in your conversations with.
Happy to provide the information I have, and Bob can chime in. We consulted with both Tim Murphy first and Jim Katsifikis. This is not an action item. You're not voting on the amendment in and of itself. So you can set have the first reading. You can set the public hearing independent of receiving a report. And then the key is you're not voting on it. You're not opening the public hearing this evening without a report. The report will be ready on this amendment as well as the other two amendments before you for your February 25th meeting in advance of that. And it's more of a logistical and a timeline. You cannot, even if a report was ready, receive a report. It has to be 10 days since the public hearing is held before you can receive a report. And you don't meet that as of February 8th. And so by February 25th, you will receive the report.
So you're asking us to vote today, and again, I'm still bringing up the point of order, is that we're being asked to vote today without all the documents, because as part of a 3-meeting process is that we have an initial meeting with a majority of the documents. And again, we've already approved that we need to have the report. So again, it can be legal, whatever you could say above the state, above that, you can't contradict what the council has already presented. It said and I'm the one who brought this motion up. I'm trying to read it. For a public hearing, send it back to the planning board for public hearing and report. We have not met that. We cannot deliberate on this report in this first meeting. So you're asking us to only deliberate at the very last meeting, which is not beneficial for the process.
Councilor Archer,
this should be delayed by 1 week.
Councilor
or until
Archer,
we get the report.
it sounds like you may want to make a motion to table.
Under the direction of the mayor, I will table this until we get the report.
There's been a motion to table by Councilor Archer.
I'll second.
Prior to it being read into the record, motion by Councilor Archer to table, second by, I think Councilor Johnston was first, but also Councilor Berman. On the motion to table, roll call vote, Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to table. Moving on to what was item F, now becomes item G, and that is a first reading zoning map amendment for the parcels on Flag Pond Road, previously zoned low-density residential to be rezoned to industrial. Councilor Johnston.
Point of order, it's the same argument. I had to say it individually because it's 3 separate amendments, and I will be saying it one more time under the next item. But the argument
Again, I don't, Councilor Archer, I don't believe it's a point of order because we've gotten legal opinion that we're well within our rights. So we can table, but I don't know that we necessarily need to do a point of order. We've addressed the point of order issue, but we can table the motion.
I still disagree with the opinion, but I will go forward. I accept that as the result and go for it.
Councilor Johnston, would you be making a motion to table this item?
I will. Motion
Thank
to
you.
table.
Is there a second on the motion to table?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. No discussion. Roll call vote on tabling. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion to table passes 7-0. We had item G, which now becomes item H, first reading zoning amendment for the parcels on Lincoln and Bradley Street, previously zoned medium density residential to be rezoned to Route 5 mixed use and zoning ordinance to be amended. Councilor Johnston.
Mr. Mayor, just point of order, it's for the record. You know my reasons and continue.
The point of order is out of order. Moving forward, Councilor Johnston.
I move to table this item.
Motion to table by Councilor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Roll call vote, Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to table. Thank you, everyone. That moves us through the action items on the agenda. Before us, we have new business, item 10. 10A is purchase and policy revisions. And I believe we're going to have a presentation. City Administrator Canrath from Finance Director Salas, who's joining us now.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Greetings and welcome, Finance Director Salas. We can hear you.
Thank you. I'm just going to get my video started. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present some of the hard work that myself, my staff, and the senior staff have done on reviewing and revising our financial policies. I'm going to start by sharing the PowerPoint version of the presentation that is included in your packet. I'm just going to get that pulled up. Can you see the PowerPoint presentation?
We can see your screen.
Perfect. And is it in presentation mode?
It is.
Thank you. Okay, so the purchasing policy. Two of the policies this evening are revisions and two are consolidations. The purchasing policy is a revision. The last time the purchasing policy was revised was in 2018. At that time, it was to clean up some of the language and to ensure compliance with uniform guidance for federal grant revenue. But the substance of the purchasing policy was essentially left alone. This revision gets a little bit more into the meat and potatoes of our purchasing process. These changes were recommended based on information that came out of the new accounts payable process, recommendations made by our new finance and payroll manager. Some other reasons that we kind of went back into the purchasing policy, we wanted to remove some overly prescriptive language that was making compliance difficult. We removed the forms. That's just a technical thing. We don't really necessarily want forms in policy because they might need to be tweaked from time to time. We removed some clauses that belonged elsewhere. So the sale of city property, that's its own policy. Lease of city property makes more sense under billing and collections. And grants management, which is complex enough to really need a dedicated policy on its own. We also removed some duplicative and unnecessary language that was still lingering in the policy. And like I mentioned, this is designed to implement some necessary process changes that have come out of our internal review over the last couple of months. So there are two copies of the purchasing policy in your packet, and the reason for that is there were some significant changes to the purchasing policy, and those revisions can get really hard to follow if you're looking at a track changes red line document, like what council typically sees for policy and ordinance updates. So there's a clean copy, so you can sort of read the policy as it will be, and there's a marked up copy if you're interested in looking at all the changes. There are also some highlights, some color coding to help guide you through the document. Process updates are in yellow. So process updates are really things that we were already doing internally that we wanted to further define or define at all in the purchasing policy. The first one is we defined responsible bidder to give departments flexibility when selecting bid responses. So the purchasing policy has always had flexibility that staff could choose not just the lowest bidder, but the bidder that was going to do quality work, even if that might be a little bit higher than the lowest bid. But we just define that a little bit better in the policy so departments feel comfortable in selecting bidders. Purchase orders are no longer required on contracts. So purchase orders, depending on the department, the department might use a purchase order to reserve funds to fulfill a contract, but other departments might have sufficient budget controls in place that there is no need for that. So we're not requiring that centrally. We also put in some language about contract extensions. This is, again, something the city's kind of just done. When you have systemically important services like your financial software, a certain information technology software, we want to allow departments to continue to extend those contracts until the point where the quality of service is no longer meeting the needs of the city. But to mandate a change every 3 or 4 years on a contract just for the sake of it with a systemically important service is not an optimal way to be running the organization. Contracted increases are allowed up to the total budgeted amount. So this has especially been a strain on the Public Works Department as construction costs have gone up much higher than anticipated. Of course, you start a project, new things come up, things that need to be fixed. We wanted to provide sufficient flexibility that up to the council appropriated amount, departments could work with their contracts to pay for the services that are needed to get a project completed. We did review canceling contract terms. We want to protect the city and ensure that there is a way for the city to remove itself from a contract that isn't working. And we reviewed that language with the city solicitor. It's language he's recommended as amendments to contracts on an ongoing basis, but now we've gotten some documentation around it. And then finally, again, this is something we were already doing, but the finance director can work with departments to establish alternative authorized documentation for payments with no invoice. So supported entity requests on an annual basis, grant disbursements, general assistance. These are the kinds of payments that come in without a formal invoice for us to reference in our financial process. Some more process updates. Invoice approval requirements are established. So we're not mandating purchase orders, but we are mandating that the finance director and the city administrator still approve purchases that meet certain threshold amounts, and that's on the advice of our auditors. Vendor credits are explicitly addressed, expired checks are addressed. Purchasing card transaction processing is addressed a little bit better. Again, purchasing card transactions follow the same approval thresholds as our other check-based payments. We also have some language in there about automated bill pay. So we have brought on NG. It's an automated utility bill pay and energy usage tracking platform. So we've sort of addressed that in the purchasing policy. There wasn't any language for that kind of service. And we also explicitly addressed end-of-year procedures for unspent funds to maintain compliance with GAAP. Are there any questions about these items in yellow, the sort of process update? Okay, on to the next section. So there were a couple process changes that we wanted to make part of this. And again, this is based on departmental feedback and internal finance department feedback. We have allowed department heads to designate another individual to approve invoices, and the finance department will establish a process for ensuring that sufficient budgetary controls remain in place for those department heads that do choose a designee. Approval exceptions are allowed for payments on accrued liabilities. So where payments are not being made out of discretionary budgeted line items, but rather on accrued liabilities out of our balance sheet. These are things like payments to the state on motor vehicle, payments to our retirement partners at Maine PERS. They're accrued as part of normal financial transactions and paid out. Holding those payments to the same payment thresholds as everything else has created some potential delays in payment processing, and we want to make sure we're getting those bills paid on time. Additional purchase exceptions for large purchases if there are only 2 qualified providers. So before there was sort of sole source, which is there's 1 provider, or you had to get 3 quotes. Sometimes there's 2. So we've addressed that. Approvals must be obtained on an invoice or purchase order, but not both. So we want to make sure departments aren't coming back and back and back for approvals on purchases. It can create some lag in our payment processing. So if there's a purchase order that's had the appropriate approvals, the department no longer has to submit those again to finance and administration for approval. We are giving finance some flexibility to establish a minimum threshold for check payments. The cost of processing a check in terms of time and staff effort sometimes exceeds the actual amount of check that we're cutting. But we're not fixing a specific amount in this policy. We want to provide the finance and other departments some time to work through the logistics of moving to other payment options for those smaller amounts. And then expired checks under $50 will be voided along with the invoice. We identified a liability in our payment system where expired checks were removed from the system, but the related invoice was not, which creates issues with accounts payable reconciliation. So this helps solve that problem. So I ran through several changes. That's sort of the high level summary. Again, the specific policy with these specific items highlighted is in the packet. And I'll take any questions on the purchasing policy change from council.
Any questions at this time? Seeing no questions. Councilor Gunn, you are assigned this. Are you willing to be the council liaison for this item when it comes up?
Most certainly, yes.
Thank you. Moving on to item B, which is investment policy revisions. Finance Director Salas.
Certainly. Okay. So once again, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so the investment policy, it's been a few more years since we looked at this. I believe it's in and around the year 2000, the last time this policy was really looked at. What was important here for me was to make sure that the city had a process in place for establishing investments. I had highlighted in the last couple of budget updates that the performance on our repurchase agreement with Bangor Savings Bank has plummeted by 90%. So we are still getting some interest in, but you know, it's looking like we're going to be making maybe 50,000 this year as opposed to 500,000, which we had budgeted. So the time has come for the city to start looking at how we're managing our unassigned fund balance. The goal here really was to simplify the policy. I did review a number of other Maine municipalities to make sure that while we were simplifying the policy to make it enforceable, we weren't in any way putting the city's financial unassigned fund balance at risk. So I did make sure to research several other municipalities and their investment policies to make sure that these changes were in line. I did eliminate some duplicative language. So again, this policy just had a lot of the same language over and over. I simplified the annual reporting process while maintaining high standards for financial partners. So Previously, this policy mandated that the finance department maintain a list of authorized banking partners and investment partners from which at any time one could be chosen. But that's a lot of work to kind of reach out. And I do think the RFP process and our purchasing policy more than covers us in terms of the proper methodology for selecting a financial or investment institution. So rather than maintaining some sort of authoritative list, the policy now directs the finance director to follow the purchasing policy in creating an RFP process, but also has some additional stipulations about who the city is going to do business with. Another thing, and this is just sort of policy best practice, the policy now references Maine state statutes instead of duplicating the language, and that just gives us some flexibility if the Maine state legislature makes some changes to the relevant laws. Our policy then is not instantly out of date, and we're not having to go back and forth between the policy and the Maine state statutes. We can reference the state statutes for their authoritative language and this policy for everything else. And finally, there's a 50% diversification threshold for investing in any one institution. So that's it for investment policy changes. This one was a little bit easier to follow, so you should have a marked up copy in your packet. Are there any questions on this from the council?
Any questions at this time? Councilor Gunn, you are the assigned counselor for this. Are you willing to make these changes?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to item C, which is disposition of city property policy. Finance Director Salas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, disposition of city property policy. So we had some questions about this in last fall around the time that we were looking to do a few write-offs, and it was a good opportunity for me to take a look at what was written down in terms of policies. Again, these were quite dated, between 15 and 20 years old, and they didn't actually cover everything that they were supposed to, and were in conflict with the disposition language in the purchasing policy. So there was a few things to do here. The major changes, first of all, like I mentioned, this combines language from a couple existing policies, the disposition of tax or sewer lien acquired property policy, and the and the personal property disposition policy, which was actually referencing the disposition of city-owned equipment. So a couple changes in here on the tax and sewer lien side. It does authorize citizens to enter into payment plans after the foreclosure date without the need for council approval. This is sort of in line with both council and staff's top mission of keeping people in their homes while simultaneously ensuring collection on property taxes. So if the citizen is willing to come and enter into payment plan and the foreclosure hasn't been presented to council, we do allow them to enter into those payment plans and then simply notify council when the foreclosures are presented that it is under payment plan and the citizen is making payments. Something else is addressed that we got as a best practice from other municipalities. There are some guidelines now for the finance director to consider when recommending retention or disposition. We've had a couple situations in the past where disposition and retention and disposition of a particular property actually ended up costing the city significant sums of money. So we want to make sure that before council forecloses on a property that we're doing our due diligence on what the risks are. And so there's a checklist for the finance director to follow now before recommending retention and disposition to council. It does simplify the process for disposing of city property. So now we're moving away from tax and sewer lien acquired property to city equipment. So computers, desks, cars, etc. We did have Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. I'm having some spotty internet tonight. So I'll try and speak slowly. So on the disposition of city equipment, the process is greatly simplified. It's no longer centralized in the city administrator's office as it had been previously. It's more diversified, and also it does address some specific cases, for instance, information technology, vehicles. It does address employees, so employees can purchase city property that is being disposed of, but they have the same access as any member of the public. So they have to go on the website if we're making use of an auction site, or whatever methodology the department is using to dispose of the equipment. Employees don't have any special access, in other words. Police evidence, there was a pretty lengthy, complicated procedure for police evidence, which is actually governed technically by Maine state statute. So we've eliminated that section and simply reference the state statute. So these are all of the changes and adjustments that we made in this policy. Are there any questions?
Any questions at this time for Finance Director Salas? Seeing no questions, Councilor Gunn, you have also been assigned this policy. Are you willing to make that motion?
Of course.
Thank you. And that brings us to item D, Billing and Collections Policy Revisions. Finance Director Salas.
Yes, thank you. So aside from the purchasing policy, I would say billing and collections underwent some of the most lengthy revisions. And that, of course, is because billing and collections does affect so many departments, and we do have so many different methodologies for collecting. First of all, we consolidated and updated a number of existing policies. So ambulance cash collection policy, the collection of personal property taxes policy, easy pay policy, and the lease of city real estate. The idea is it's a little bit easier to have a single longer policy than to try and jump around between policies to find specific procedures. This policy does address longstanding challenges. So what do we do with very old unpaid bills and write-offs? We do have unpaid bills going back to 2003, almost the time when we stood Munis up for the first time. So it's good to have something on the books that allows the finance director to go in and clean that up on a regular basis. This new policy also addresses some changes that we've had to make, both from an operational standpoint and simply because of the pressures of COVID-19 in 2020 and even now in 2021. We now have electronic payment only at the transfer station. That's been a significant improvement in terms of the speed at which the transfer station can process transactions. It does address parking ticket collection online. That's our new UpCity software. And it does also address ambulance billing. So when the ambulance billing policy was written, the city was still collecting internally. Now we partner with a billing company. First it was the town of Freeport, and now we're working with Quick Med Claims. So that's addressed in the collections policy. Finally, there's just some documentation for existing procedures. We tried to keep it from being overly prescriptive, but still provide good guidance. Billing for services, how does that work? Accounting for revenue, what is our daily cash procedure? Some major changes for the city in this policy. We have stood up a formal policy for transferring bills to collections. In the past, there hasn't really been a tool for the city to collect other than sending out statements and invoices. And so this gives the finance department a little bit more tools in the toolbox, if you will, to get the city the money that it is owed. Unpaid bills may be transferred to collections if unpaid under the following circumstances. So for general billing, it's unpaid bills past 12 months. For parking tickets, non-resident unpaid bills past 6 months. The reason we specify non-resident versus resident is simply that residents that don't pay more than 3 parking tickets are at risk of being towed. So we do have in the city ordinance some pretty strong enforcement measures for paying parking tickets. But of course, for non-residents who might come here once and get a parking ticket and maybe not come back again, this allows us to move those particular bills over to collections. Ambulance services, unpaid bills past 6 months. This is consistent with our current policy. And personal property taxes, unpaid bills more than 90 days past the close of the fiscal year. So personal property taxes has a very specific timeline, that's in the policy and addresses when personal property taxes can be transferred to collections. Some might ask, why transfer unpaid bills to collections? That can feel a little bit aggressive. As a municipality, we really are all about serving our citizens. Really comes down to eliminating the need for additional staffing. We don't have the staffing now to chase these unpaid balances or to embark on any kind of enforcement measures. Collections sort of takes on that responsibility for us, and for that they are paid a fee. And any revenue would be incremental to our current collections based on our internal processes. Are there any questions specifically about this piece of it? Okay. Another major change is addressing write-offs. So this is a challenge, right? Should the finance director be bringing a $52 bill to council for authorization to write off? This revision authorizes the finance director to write off small amounts, so under $1,000, under the following circumstances. So there needs to be a demonstrated financial need, or the entity that has been billed is no longer in business. We can't really collect on a bill for an entity that doesn't exist. The individual, if it's an individual bill, no longer resides at the address on record with no forwarding address available. And the individual does not reside or own property in Saco. So if someone gets a bill for whatever reason from the city and they don't live here anymore, they don't own property here, and they don't have a forwarding address, there's not really a way for us to collect on that. The payment balance is in excess of 10 years old. I do think it's, once you get past the 10-year point, you're going to be unsuccessful collecting in any amount, even in small claims court. And then the last step is that for any write-offs that are undertaken during the year, the finance director will provide council with an annual report of those. So you don't have to be concerned that the finance director might go in there and just start writing things off. There will be an annual report. Council approval is reserved for large write-offs, which are over $1,000. Are there any questions on the write-off procedure? So another change, and I touched on this, personal property tax collection. So there was a pretty technical and time-intensive personal property tax collection process that was on the books. Unfortunately, the staffing wasn't there to really support. And I did reach out and do some research with some of our surrounding communities, and the recommendation that I got in general was that for personal property tax collection, migrating those bills to collections is probably the best way to go, because they are hard to collect on. You can't foreclose and take possession of personal property, which is sort of business equipment and that kind of thing, the way that you can with tax acquired real estate. So like I said, we optimized the process for existing staff capacity. We transfer amounts 30 days after the close of the fiscal year. There's a reminder sent out, and then if no response is received on that, amounts greater than $100 are transferred to a collections agency. For amounts greater than $10,000, the finance department will also file a UCC lien, so that if the equipment is ever resold, the city does have some capacity to collect. Just some other updates based on current practice. Like I said, the general billing and cash collections, we just document our current process. Transfer station, we made permanent the change to electronic payments. It has been a major process improvement, better tracking, better fiscal controls, and of course, minimize close contacts in the time of COVID. Parking tickets, the new online payment system is referenced, and then Chapter 211-50 is referenced for unpaid tickets. That's the ordinance where you can get towed for more than 3 unpaid tickets. Ambulance services, again, allows for the use of a billing company and outlines the process for reconciling receipts. And finally, the lease of city property. So this is where we do address renting city property, sort of like what we do at the train station. We do have not only the lease process, but also an eviction timeline. Unfortunately, the city has had some issues with non-payment on rental leases, and I think it's important to at least have in writing what the enforcement procedures are for that. Are there any questions on the billing and collections process policy? This is everything that I had.
Thank you, Finance Director Salas. Any questions for the Finance Director? Councilor Menton?
I just want to thank you guys for all your hard work and bringing all this stuff up to date. I know it was a Herculean task with everything going on and the shortages of staff from time to time in your area. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. My staff has been working really hard through the pandemic, and I can't thank them enough.
Any other questions? Okay, so Councilor Gunn, you've been assigned this billing and collection policy revision as well. Are you willing to make that motion, or would you like to defer to another councilor?
No, I'll be more than happy to make the motion.
Thank you very much. And with that, that brings us to the end of new business. That brings us to item 11, the administrative update. City Administrator Kainrath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A reminder regarding our beach parking survey. The Saco Traffic Safety Committee is interested in your feedback about beach parking. Please complete our online survey, which is open until February 22nd, to share your thoughts on beach access and parking. The survey will allow for a wide variety of citizen input from Saco residents to anyone who visits Saco's beaches. The collected data will assist the Traffic Safety Committee, city staff, and elected officials in making decisions about a comprehensive beach parking plan for the summer. So please visit our website online to complete the survey. And again, we appreciate your feedback. Some updates on senior meal programs. A reminder, Saco Parks and Rec will be holding our event this week on February 12th from 11 to 12:30 at the community center. The meal will be provided by the Deli and Company, and this will be sponsored by Strategic Media Incorporated. Additionally, Age Friendly Saco will be hosting another Farmers to Families event on February 10th at the Saco Middle School, 9 a.m. to 12 noon. Native Maine produce of West
City Administrator Kainrath, I think you're frozen at the moment.
Saco.
Welcome back, Brian.
Are you still with me?
You were frozen as you were going.
I'm not sure where I
age-friendly.
stopped. What was the
Through
last
the
thing you heard?
Age-friendly, and who is sponsoring the Farmers to Families Food Box on Wednesday, the 10th.
So yes, on Wednesday, the 10th, at the Saco Middle School, 9 a.m. to 12 noon, Native Maine Produce of Westbrook will be supplying the boxes. Anyone is eligible. If you're unable to pick up the box, call age-friendly volunteer Lynn Steed at 494-8662 to have the box delivered. And please be sure to leave your name, address, telephone number when you leave your message, and we'll have the box delivered to your home. So in addition, Age-Friendly Saco will be in collaboration with the Ferry Beach Retreat and Conference Center. We'll provide the community a delivery meal option on February 18th. People in Saco and neighbors in Bitterford or Old Orchard may call 282-4489, press 1, extension 1 or extension 6 to place an order. All orders must be received by 12 noon on February 12th. And 300 meals have been reserved for that event. So a number of options for our seniors in the next couple of weeks. A reminder, Mary's Walk, the 23rd annual Mary's Walk in Kerriman Pub 5K will be held virtually again this year, March 21st of this year. Again, the city's wellness program is sponsoring the first 20 city employees. Your registration fees should you choose to participate. And of course, we are encouraging all who can to participate again in this virtual event this year. The joint Saco Biddeford Council's working group will be tentatively be meeting on February 25th to discuss, among other things, the harbor master position and the shared communication center for dispatch in its infancy stage. Reminder, City Administrator open office hours will be on February 23rd, 3 to 5 p.m. here at the City Hall Auditorium. All residents and local business owners are, of course, welcome and encouraged to attend and share their thoughts, views, concerns, and complaints. That's all I have. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, City Administrator Kinrath. Any questions for the City Administrator? Moving on to item 12, which is council discussion and comment. No council discussion and comment tonight. Brings us to item 13, which is executive session. Is there a motion to enter executive session?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, be it ordered the City Council enter into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, Section 4056C, possible property acquisition.
Motion's been made by Councilor Minthorn. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Purdy. Discussion on entering executive session. A roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to enter executive session at 8:49 p.m. Please migrate over to the executive session Zoom link that was provided to you by the City Administrator. Okay, welcome back. Is there a motion to exit executive session?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, be it ordered, City Council exit executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, Section 4056C, possible property acquisition.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion on exiting executive session? A roll call vote, Council Archer,
Aye.
Councilor Purdy,
Yes.
Councilor Gunn,
Yes.
Councilor Berman,
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn,
Yes.
Councilor McPhail,
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to exit executive session at 9:40 PM. Is there any report out of executive session?
Mr. Mayor, there is no report.
No report from executive session. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Councilor Minthorn, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. A discussion on adjournment. Roll call vote on adjournment. Councilor Archer,
Aye.
Councilor Purdy,
Yes.
Councilor Gunn,
Yes.
Councilor Berman,
Yes.
Councilor Minthorn,
Yes.
Councilor McPhail,
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn passes 7-0 at 9:41 PM. Thank you very much, everyone, for a good evening, good discussion, a lot of amendments, and take care, be well, and stay safe.
Good night.